More than 100 years ago, a beautiful baby girl was born in faraway Norway, the land of the midnight sun, in the city of Christiania. She was given the name of Astrid that January 24th of 1885 by her parents, Jørgen Johannes and Jensine Jensen Johannesson. She also had two sets of loving grandparents, Asta Katrine Johnson and Anders Johannesson, and Peter and Helene Olsen Jensen, from whence came my middle name. Though Astrid was born in Christiania, now known as Oslo, her destiny with her family lay not in Norway, but many thousands of miles away, in the land of America. For the father had embraced a religion not well known in her country, and was baptized into the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. At this time, a vital decision was made, and plans were begun to journey to the Utah Territory. Statehood had not yet been granted. Two older brothers, Oscar and Sigurd, this little daughter, now 2, shown in this picture, and a 8-year-old baby brother, Arnie, were gathered together by their parents to begin a month-long voyage across the vast Atlantic Ocean. There were several means of transportation used. They traveled to the seaport by sleigh, then crossed the waters in the ship Wyoming, similar to the ship pictured. It was rough sailing, but they finally arrived in New York, only to be left aboard and taken down the coast to Charleston, South Carolina, when they embarked on a long train ride, and finally arrived in Salt Lake City on June 14, 1887. Her father and his brother, who had earlier come from Norway, obtained employment as bookkeepers with the United Order Lumber Company in Logan. The family lived in this home during that period. This is an early picture of Mother with her parents and 3 brothers, about 1890. 2 years later, Astrid's mother gave birth to stillborn twin baby girls, and 16 months later, she asked for baptism into the church. Previously, she had been quite bitter about her husband's embracing another religion, but she experienced a great change of heart after the loss of the infant daughters, and was always strong thereafter in her testimony of the gospel. She and her husband and children were sealed in the Logan Temple November 5th, 1890. Another son, Henry, was born in 1891, and in 1892, Jørgen and his brother were asked to move to southern Idaho on a pioneering mission as employees of Zion's Cooperative Mercantile Institution in Idaho Falls. 3 more brothers were born, Wilford and Vaughn and Jørgen, who was stillborn. This is a picture of 9-year-old Astrid with Henry, Wilford, and Arnie about 1894. A later picture of the 7 is shown here. Astrid received most of her schooling in Idaho Falls, was given piano lessons for a number of years, and served as accompanist for various organizations during the early years of her life. When her parents celebrated their golden wedding anniversary in December of 1927, Astrid was almost 43 and the mother of 8 children. This is the first family picture of the whole group of 10 of us. In the meantime, in Ogden, a young boy, 5 years her senior, was leading a busy life. That little boy, Joseph Morley, was born February 2nd, 1880, to William and Isabel Pardo Morley. His father, a fine musician, was one of the organizers of the Ogden Brass Band. His instrument was a French horn, and his son Joseph often related his great pride in seeing his father, handsomely uniformed, as he marched in a parade and participated in programs and concerts. Joseph started school in Ogden, but moved with his family to Salt Lake City when he was 11, where he finished his grade school education and attended high school. The move was necessitated because of the death of his mother's sister, leaving a bereaved husband and 7 children. Isabel and William Morley sold their barber shop, and with 4 young children, Joseph, Sadie, Ruby, and Clarence, moved into the home of her late sister, where she cared for a household of 14 for several years until her brother-in-law remarried. 4 other children, Valerie, Milton, Arvilla, and Elsie, who died in infancy, were born in Salt Lake. In 1944, Isabel, a widow since 1910, celebrated her 85th birthday with all of her children present, Clarence, Joseph, Valerie, and Milton on the back row, and in front, Ruby, Grandma Morley, Arvilla, and Sadie. The move from Ogden provided many musical opportunities for Joseph, which he might not otherwise have received, for he joined a children's choir directed by the famed conductor, Evan Stevens. Later, as his voice deepened into a rich baritone, he became a member of the Tabernacle Choir. He and 3 companions also formed a quartet, and Joseph recalled that they sang all over the city. Just before the turn of the century, dressed in peasant regalia, he sang in the chorus of the Salt Lake Opera Company. These performances took place in the old Salt Lake Theater, constructed in 1861 on the corner of State Street and 2nd South. Unfortunately, it has been gone for many years. These varied experiences were a great schooling for the span of many decades which followed, when he was to devote his talents wholeheartedly to bringing his church and community closer together through the medium of music. Joseph was drawn to the town of Eagle Rock as a young man of 20 by a friend who was working in this small but energetic town. It presented a pretty bleak picture to him as he stepped off the train into several feet of snow, even though the calendar told him it was April. This is an early picture of Idaho Falls. His first intention was just to stay a short time, but the smaller town, later called Idaho Falls, and the pioneering spirit of the area challenged him, and he decided to cast his lot with the fast-growing valley. He soon became involved musically, and his talents widened as he participated in what was the beginning of more than a half-century of musical creativity. He had been in Idaho Falls for but a short time, a year and a half at most, when he was called to direct the choir of the LDS First Ward, the only ward at that time in Idaho Falls. He was most reluctant to accept that position, for he had had no previous experience as a conductor. But he did assume the responsibility, and he recalled to his family how he purchased a number of books on the techniques of directing, and through diligent study became very proficient in this field. Musically, he was self-taught. Joseph's notation indicated that this choir picture was taken in 1904. Now the destinies of 2 young people would soon be decided as this handsome, dapper young man from Utah became acquainted with the lovely, green-eyed, auburn-haired maiden not yet finished with her high school years. Joseph must have found a deep attraction there, for when Astrid was graduated from high school in a class of 4, he showered her with red roses. The date was May 19th, 1903, and the program at the graduation service included a vocal solo by one Joseph Morley. This picture is of Mother's graduation class. She is second from left. Less than a year later, on March 16th, 1904, they were married in the Salt Lake Temple. This is a copy of their wedding marriage certificate and their invitation to the reception. Many beautiful and uneventful years lay ahead for this young couple. Their first child, Marsh Joseph, shown in this picture with his mother, was born April 9th, 1907. They were to become the parents of 7 more children. 6 of the 8 are shown in this early photo. Betty and Mary in front. In back, Dorothy, Louise, Robert, and Morris. Joseph became more active in community and church with his musical talents, with Astrid always at his side, quietly supporting him, encouraging him, and sometimes chastising him a bit when he was nursing hurt feelings, or if he felt he had been unjustly slighted for all of his efforts. Sometimes he was very vocal about his feelings. His buddy, as he affectionately called Astrid, was most ardent and enthusiastic about the great efforts and talents he displayed in his performances, but she did try to keep him humble. This is one of the choirs in the First Ward, directed by Joseph. Astrid is on the second row in the soprano section. Joseph was a choir director for many years and trained a number of local musical groups to enter the church music festivals in Salt Lake City. His baton and inexhaustible energy were also set to work in a myriad of church benefits during those early years. He was a member of a well-known singing group, the Sunnyland Quartet, which became one of the most popular musical attractions in the valley. In 1916, these 4 local artists joined with a group of fine women vocalists to form a double mixed quartet which won first place in church-wide competition in Salt Lake City. His musical productions in the community were memorable, not only for the quality, but for the quantity. In 1916, he directed the First Ward Choir in the cantata, The Rose Maiden. Together with G.W. Charlesworth, he produced the opera, The Mikado, in 1915. Other productions included the oratorio, The Holy City, with the First Ward Choir in 1923. Many years later, in 1945, he directed the Fourth Ward Choir in the same production. In February of 1928, he co-produced with Jack Denning, a well-known musician, the light opera, The Jolly Musketeer, in which a daughter, Louise, had a leading role. This was followed by a production of the popular Gilbert and Sullivan light opera, Yeoman of the Guard, as a fundraiser for the building of the Third Ward Church, which was under construction. The program showed Louise in a leading role, and she is shown here in a special dance with Oscar Johnson. Dad and his good friend, Oscar Johnson, a fine organist, produced jointly The Chimes of Normandy in 1934. 2 of Mother and Dad's children, Morris and Louise, had leading roles. And there were many others, a few of which included his direction of a 100-voice community choir in a concert of excerpts from the oratorio, The Elijah, under the sponsorship of the Idaho Falls Music Club. An LDS Centennial production, Light Everlasting, written by Murdy Armstrong in 1947. Presentations of the cantata, Song of Thanksgiving, on 2 different occasions. The Christmas cantata, The Christ Child, by the Fifth Ward Women's Chorus, and his directing of a large choir on the steps of the LDS Temple in a special Pioneer Day concert in July of 1950. This is a picture of another choir that Dad conducted, and he made a notation on the picture saying, "This is the best choir I ever conducted." Astrid was a devoted and unselfish mother, more often than not foregoing much-needed shoes for herself so that her children might have a new pair for Easter or some other special occasion. Though she did not hold many teaching positions during those growing years of her children, she always sang with the choir, was a visiting teacher, and made it possible for her husband to achieve the success he enjoyed by her undemanding spirit and willingness for him to be away from the home so much in fulfilling his obligations. In paying tribute to her, Dad many times reiterated that he could never have accomplished so much in the music field without such support. This is a 1937 picture of Mother with her 5 daughters. She dearly loved each one of us. Mother also totally supported all of her children whenever they were involved in any performance, no matter how small the role they played. Since there was no family car, she walked many, many miles to school and church to witness those performances. How important this was to her children. And just knowing she was there to support them gave them the incentive to reach a little higher, to achieve more excellence. Her devotion to her parents was a great example of unselfish love and care. During the years her mother was alone, she walked to her home at least once a day to care for her needs. Many times she made this trip twice daily, a distance of more than a mile each way. Grandmother had many health problems at that time and was often not able to get out of bed. As the children reached adulthood and left to begin their own families, Astrid was able to accept many calls in the church, serving a number of years on the Idaho Falls Stake Relief Society board and as a teacher of young girls in the MIA. She was also an officer in the Idaho Falls Music Club and served in various capacities in that organization for a number of years. This is a picture of Mother in front of her lovely little home. This was the first home that Mother and Dad ever built. Her beautiful example of selfless service to her parents, her husband, and her sons and daughters should never be forgotten by those who have followed her. Her untimely death came at the age of 65, when she could no longer fight a rare and debilitating illness. Death came quietly on August 21st, 1950, in her home on 5th Street. Her family is shown in this picture, taken in about 1930, when Louise was leaving to return to school at the University of Idaho. On the back row, Dorothy, who passed away June 30th, 1973, Mother, Morris, Louise, Bob, and Dad. And on the front row were Mary, Jean, Bill, and Betty. Morris died on January 27th, 1985. Mother set a wonderful, righteous example for all of her family to follow in their lives. This second picture was probably the last family picture with Mother, and this was taken in 1942, not long after World War II was in progress. One of Dad's great loves was a Sunday school, which was almost equal to his love for music. He served as superintendent, as the office was called then, in the First Ward for many years. And later, after the family moved into the Second Ward, he was again called to serve in that position. This picture shows Joseph and his counselors on the steps of the Little Rock Church, the Little First Ward. The large picture shows the entire Sunday school seated outside of the church. Dad was standing to the left, several rows back. Louise is on the front row, far left, and Dorothy, fourth from the right on the front row, seemed to be more interested in the ribbons on her dress than having her picture taken. Dad also served in a bishopric as counselor to Bishop James Laird, and for many years was in the presidency of the 146th Quorum of the 70. Early in his career, he managed the Dinwiddie Furniture Store on Park Avenue in Idaho Falls. These are some interior pictures, and one of them shows Dad with his sales crew on the second level of the store. He was always a people-oriented person and excelled in public relations. In so doing, he became an excellent salesman and brought good business into the company. After Warren G. Harding was elected President of the United States, Dad applied for and was appointed Idaho Falls Postmaster. This is a certificate of the appointment signed by President Harding. This position he held for 12 years, reappointed in both Calvin Coolidge and Herbert Hoover's administrations. The post office was an intriguing place for his children to visit, and occasionally he would take us backstage, so to speak, and watch the mail go through the canceling machines and see other operations of this busy place. This is a picture of Dad in the back part of the post office with an extra heavy mailing. He had a nice, spacious office which contained at the rear a large walk-in safe where all the stamps and other items were kept along with the receipts for the day. He also had his own private bath with shower, which his children thought was pretty neat. With the change to a Democratic administration, he was not reappointed, and the family struggled through the latter years of the Depression until 1937, when Dad entered the furniture business once more with a son-in-law, Ralph Chapin, establishing the Morley Chapin Furniture Company. The first of these two pictures shows the original store where they first opened up for business, and then about a block east they eventually built a new building, which is shown in this second picture. Dad was a great force in encouraging a high level of music in the valley, and he gave up his time and talents freely to his community. He assisted the Holy Rosary Catholic Church in conducting their choir for the Christmas services one year, and he also on occasion directed a choir for the Episcopal Church. For many years he organized and directed a chorus for the student nurses at the LDS School of Nursing. He demanded excellence in his performances, as well as those whom he directed, and he never appeared before his choirs without being thoroughly prepared to the extent that he had completely learned and familiarized himself with every phase of the music. Dad generously shared his talents with aspiring young conductors and was a great influence in the lives of many who became excellent choral directors. Literally, thousands sang under his baton during that 50-year-plus span. A special testimonial concert was held on January 15, 1954, to honor Dad for his many years of musical leadership. Co-chairman of the event was a son-in-law, Paul Alstrom. All the music presented had at one time been conducted by him. The Fifth Ward Chapel and Cultural Hall were filled to capacity with his myriad of friends who came to pay tribute to his years of service. He also received many cards and letters of appreciation. Special to him was a letter from Stephen L. Richards, counselor to President McKay. President Richards had been superintendent of the General Board of the Sunday School when Dad was serving as superintendent in the First Ward. President Richards visited many times in Idaho Falls with Dad and was always very complimentary of the quality of his Sunday school. President Richards and Dad remained good friends through all the years. Music was not his only interest in life, however. Along with the pleasures of his large family, he was an avid sports fan, and more often than not, it was not in the capacity of a spectator. He was a super baseball player in his younger years, and he also became very skilled and competitive at tennis. When he turned to golf, he worked at his game to become one of the best senior golfers at Pinecrest Golf Course. Dad loved the game and was a great competitor. Still other interests occupied his time after the death of his beloved companion. About the time he turned 79, he began a new hobby, painting. He started with pen and ink sketches, something he had pursued briefly in his youth. Now it became a fascinating new outlet for him, and as he became more experienced, he decided to work in a different medium, watercolors. His family loved his work and were thrilled to have him share his paintings. On 2 different occasions, he appeared in the Post-Register, displaying some of his beautiful watercolors at the Kiwanis Club, where he had once been a member, and another time in his home. He had many admirers of his paintings, and was even persuaded to sell a few, but most of them are proud possessions of his children and grandchildren, who cherish this added talent with which he was blessed. Mother would have smiled in approval. Dad observed his 85th birthday in California at the home of a daughter, Dorothy Chapin, the day after the funeral service for his oldest son, Morris. Musical notes replaced the candles on his birthday cake. All his remaining sons and daughters were together, filled with mixed emotions at 2 such tender events. It was an opportunity for a family portrait with Dad. To his right were his youngest son, Bill, and daughter, Dorothy, and to his left, the youngest daughter, Jean Christensen, son, Bob, and daughter, Betty Alstrom. Seated in front were daughters Louise Amos and Mary Schwendeman. In 1966, he was the 80th Grand Marshal of the Pioneer Day Parade in Idaho Falls in July. Another special honor in the Salt Lake Tabernacle was a surprise occasion for him when he was invited to attend a rehearsal of the choir, where he was recognized as the oldest living member of the choir. Civically, Dad was one of the greatest boosters of Idaho Falls and loved the city. It would be impossible to count all the hours of service he gave from the time he moved there until his retirement in the latter years of his life. He is remembered particularly for his untiring efforts in bringing airline service to Idaho Falls at a time when the local airport was just emerging into the air age. He was chairman of the first city-appointed aviation committee. He is shown in this photo, third from right, with other civic leaders and pilots. His enthusiastic and productive work in this field was especially characteristic because he was not a pilot, and up to that time had little association with the field. He was given a lifetime honorary certificate in the Idaho Falls Chamber of Commerce in recognition of outstanding and devoted service to the community. Dad loved young people, and they returned that affection. They had a great relationship. He could discuss almost any subject with them and surprised them many times with his recall of statistics on most sports events. He always found plenty to do in his cozy little home on 435 Fifth Street. If you were to enter the house at any time, you would likely see a copy of Sports Illustrated at the side of his easy chair in the living room. At the kitchen table were his scriptures, likely opened to a favorite passage of scriptures. His little dining room included his drafting table with one of his paintings in progress. And in some corner, one could see a small glass on its side, and nearby a cluster of golf balls and a putter. He was always trying to improve his game. If he had difficulty sleeping at night, he would arise from his bed, perhaps read a bit, maybe add a few brush strokes to a painting, or even put a few balls into the glass. Of course he knew loneliness, but he didn't burden his family with those feelings. Most of the time, optimism prevailed. A few paragraphs from an editorial in the Post-Register, written following his death, sum up the character of our Dad. Joseph Morley, that blithe spirit of brotherhood in Idaho Falls for so many years, was a man forever at peace with himself and the many people he befriended. His soft-mannered buoyancy and light-heartedness was the unchanging emblem of this little man, who was as diverse in his interests as he was broad in his fellowship. His many friends were of all creed, race, and status, because Joe Morley was a constancy of happiness and happy acceptance of them all. He was a businessman, choir leader, golfer, LDS church leader, postmaster, and community music activist, and to all he brought that serenity of spirit that refreshed those who worked or played with him. Joseph passed away October 23rd, 1972, after a brief stay in the hospital. He had not been ill and was generally in good health for a man of 92 plus. Typical of his interest in life around him to the very end was his question to his daughter Betty as she visited him in the hospital. She had tried to reach him by phone during the morning, and when she didn't receive an answer, she and a son went to his home later and found him incapacitated. He was taken to the hospital, where she told him that she had tried to reach him by phone, and when he didn't answer, decided he must be watching the World Series, which was being televised. Even though his body was weak and tired, and his voice faint, he looked at her with a little smile and asked, "Who won?" In the eyes of their children, both he and mother were the winners, two great individuals devoted to family, church, and country, who left a heritage for the generations to follow. Through the recording of this video history, may you feel the spirit of your forebears and learn from their great example how to better handle the good times as well as the adversities with patience and grace. They truly have taught us many great lessons. When our times come, may we, as their posterity, graduate with flying colors as they surely did.